If you guys enjoy the content on my art videos, you can find me on YouTube, Instagram, Odyssey. You can also find me on TikTok as well. Okay, with that said, let's see what we can learn today. Hello everybody, welcome back. It's been such a long time since I actually made a video, and I'm really happy that you guys actually like my stuff, because I've been very self-conscious about how I make my content, and it took me this long to actually make content because I got so wrapped up of making things so perfect that it took away from what we're supposed to be doing, as in just to learn how to draw or learn how to color or learn how to paint or whatever the case may be when it comes to digital art. So I'm so sorry for that, guys. I'm finally back, and I finally got over that hump of trying to be a perfectionist all the time, because that can take away from what you're ultimately trying to do. Now, there's going to be some changes that's going to be brought to the channel. I want to at least announce. I'm going to be trying some new stuff like art challenges and other art related topics, or art related content that seems fun to watch other than just a tutorial. Not saying I'm abandoning tutorials at all. I'm still going to be making them, but more crash course versions of them. But if you want in-depth type versions of those tutorials, I will be making a Gumroad. I have made the Patreon, so those of you who been following me, and those of you who have actually did the whole Patreon thing for supporting the channel, I thank you guys, and you guys names will be at the end of this video. So congratulations to you guys who actually support and all that stuff. So thank you so much. I do appreciate that. Hopefully we'll get more patrons throughout the time of me making more content for every Sunday and all that great stuff. So sorry about that old whole-winded explanation, but with that said, we're gonna show and do how to color by using shade and light and blending. So what this actually focuses on is a concept called color temperature, but I'll get into that with the crash course. And also, guys, I would love to give a special thanks to the Gray Ninja. He was so awesome for helping me understand color theory more, specifically when it comes to color temperature, other than just knowing what's warm, what's cold, which we'll get to that very soon. I would like to give him a shout out for being patient with me and explaining to me how it works, because I was really confused on some concepts for this very video. So for him, I give him a special thanks. Please everyone, give him a follow on Instagram, follow all his social media. I'll put all his stuff at the link of the descriptions at the bottom. So please give him a like, give him a follow, please follow him. He is awesome. He makes awesome content, really dope content. So with that said, thank you so much, dude. I hope you see this, and then I hope this puts a big smile on your face. Thank you so much. Hey guys, I have these two spheres that I'm going to show you. So this is something that most beginners tend to make a big mistake on compared to experience. I'm going to show you how the beginner side starts, and I'm going to explain my my understanding of what most beginners or / amateurs do. In most cases, when it comes to coloring, they usually do this thing where they take the spray tool, and then they just keep going with it and using it and using it and using it. And what they do with shadows is that they take the shadow of the spray tool and just keep going and make it darker and darker and darker and darker and darker, not taking the consideration of the area they're in, the color of the sphere itself. Like for instance, this is more like a tannish orangey type color, and what happens is they took the color, well, they'll usually take the color and just go straight to black and just make things black on one side and think that looks nice. And then when they're done, they think, even though I made all I put the shading where it's supposed to be, which probably is accurate in a sense, why does it look weird? So what happens is that they get lost in the idea that what is shadow, when they don't understand the concept of how colors plays into shadows alongside with light. What the experience does, which what I did, I think a bit experience on this one, what I did is make sure that the shadow is there, but I have to understand the concept of the color that is there. So the warmness of that color, which we'll get into very soon, but just look closely at what I do here with more experience, so it feels more realistic, it feels more understanding of how color behaves. I think I did a pretty good job. I don't think it's too perfect, but I think it's a lot more of a better transition compared to the beginner side of things. I know it's kind of hard to understand this right now, but I'm just showing the difference between the two. So just take some time to actually look closely at what I did. But if you guys still can't figure out, don't worry, we will talk about that. Just take some time to look at it, analyze it, and all that stuff, so you guys can get a better understanding of how this works. Now, color temperature. How does color temperature work? So we have cool and we have warm. So on the warm side, we have our yellows, our oranges, we have our reddish oranges, and we have our violets. I think no, pink, or like hot pink or something like that. On the other side, we have our purples, our greens and blues, and violets. I think that's pretty much the same thing. Like purples, greens, blues are more like cool colors. If you guys remember this, we did talk about this in one of my previous videos of color groups and understanding that and all great stuff. So I suggest you guys check that out if you get confused on these terms and all that stuff. So please, it'll be in the corner somewhere in this video. You pretty much see it. So if you're confused on anything or you need to understand those things, I suggest you go to that video and come back to this. Now we have an orange and a yellow. Please pause this. So I'm just letting you guys know, pause this and take some time to think which color is more warmer, which one's more cooler, and which one's more warm. Even though these two are on the same side of the temperature spectrum, both yellow and orange, both yellow and red are both warm on the temperature scale, but one is cooler than the other. So which one's more cooler than the other? Is it red or is it orange? Is it red or is it yellow? And I want you guys to pause it and take some time to check this out and figure out what it is. So most likely, as you can see, if you guess yellow, yes, you are right. Yellow is cool and red is the warmest. If not the warmest, but the most intense at the same time. So how do you make a distinction on this? Do you have to memorize this stuff? Honestly, no, because what happens is that the more intense a color is, mainly not darker, but most intense that color is, the more likely it's going to be warm. So that makes more sense. You see that? Because since red is more intense and like brightness, it makes more sense. Because there's more green in yellow than it is in red, if that makes sense. So let me do this again with the cool colors. Now we take purple and we take green. Pause it, take some time, look this over, just try your best to understand this. Now, which one's more cooler? Now, I would probably say between the two. I think that the purple is probably more warmer. Wait, move. I'll say the purple's more warmer than the green because there is literal red in purple. Like, purple's more warmer than yellow because there's blue and there's yellow, right? But because blue is more cooler than yellow, but yellow is not more than red, but there's blue in purple, I suggest that green is much more cooler than purple. I hope that makes sense. So always remember that. Because there's literal red, which is the warmest color, than yellow when it comes to mixing these colors. So like yellow and green, yellow and blue makes green. Yellow is warm, blue is cold. And then there's purple, blue, and red. But red is the most intense color than yellow. So given that sense that purple is more cooler, because since they mix blue and red, purple's more warmer than green. I hope that makes total sense without confusing guys. Please put a comment if that didn't confuse you, please, because the more feedback, I'll try to explain better if it did. Well, I'm going to teach you guys how I do things in my better method on how I do things. Not saying it's better than your thing, but I'm just saying this is what works for me as a better method than what I used to believe. first, I'm going to list a few things. Number 1, you need shadows. Number 2, you need light. Number 3, you need cast shadows. And number 4, you're going to need ambient occlusion. And number 5, bounce light and reflective light. Before we get into the actual coloring, I want to talk about bounce light and reflective light. This is something very important that I learned from the Gray Ninja. He taught me this. So what he told me was that bounce light and reflective light is, I think, pretty much the same thing. So what happens is when light comes through, it bounces and loses its intensity. But when it loses its intensity, it bounces off and bounces off the color that's next to it. So like how I put the red ball next to the blue wall, that means the closer, or the environment ultimately makes all the difference. So even though the ball is next to the white wall, what happens is that the color that the light bounces into bounces back and forth to each other, and it kind of reflects back. So the blue that's on the wall goes onto the ball, and the ball does the same, and vice versa in that sense. So it not only just falls with the light, it also falls alongside the shadows as well. So as you can see here, the blue is because it's close to blue, the blue will be into the shadows in a sense alongside with the red. I hope I explained this right, because at first I didn't get it. At first I thought it was kind of confusing. And if you're wondering, I don't think the colors mix all that much when it comes to the reflectiveness of each other. I think the color just kind of fades in. So like for instance, if the shadow, say like if the blue is next to the red and the shadows is on the shadow side, the shadows will be kind of blue, but not like dark blue or anything. It's just going to be kind of blue. Kind of like a little tint of blue. If you put a little tint, that's just enough to give it that realism. But if you put like a really dark blue or something into like that shadow, it's not going to make sense. So I hope that was a good explanation itself, because I was kind of self-conscious even explaining this, because at first it made sense to me in my head, but when I explain it, it kind of sounds like I'm talking craziness. So please let me know if I explained that right. If I didn't, I'll try to explain it and write this down so I can get this right, because I want to explain it and for you guys to understand it. So I'm going to show you guys here this quick method of how I change and pick colors. So what happens is, as you can see, we're just focusing on just on shadows, but as you can see in the shadows that I put a bit of like a pattern-ish. Like I don't go into the blending yet or anything like that yet. I just post in where's the darks, where's the shadows, the light shadows, and to the less intense. So remember, the light is coming down, so I put the light there so you have a good visual representation of where the light is being placed. So since we know where the light is shining down, and it does matter how close the light is and how far it is, but since I put in this mid light, I put the shadows pretty, I think the closer the light is, the bigger the cast, and the further away, the smaller the cast shadow is. So that is important to know. But because we're not really focusing on how close it is, we're just focusing on the shadows itself alongside with light. So put the shadows in like a layer type thing so you guys can see what needs to be focused on, like the basic shadows, the lighter shadows, and the dark shadows, and then the ambient occlusion, which is the darkest of darks, meaning that's where at the crevice of the ball where light cannot reach. That is literally what ambient light is. I mean, ambient occlusion is. It's where that's where the darkest area. I mentioned this in one of my videos. I think it was in the grayscale video. I didn't mention that. So that's something you guys should really look into to understand ambient occlusion. That is very important to know. It gives that realismness of where the really darks go, so it gives you that somewhat 3D look of the ball. I'm just sticking with balls today, or spheres, because I think that's easier to understand than using a square or a triangle, even though they kind of could be the same, but I just like using the ball because that's just my preference to do this tutorial. So please don't be too mad at me if I didn't use any other shape. But I did choose to do a somewhat of a art dummy. I know you guys kind of complained about As much as that you guys like my tutorials, I know some of you come to my live stream and say, why don't you do some anime work? You are an anime artist, you know. So I did this thing where I showed the setting for skin color, and no, I'm not going to mention some surface scattering that is important to know. I think that's for another video for another day when it comes to skin, because I think that could be a video on its own. But since we're not really on the topic of skin, this is just more based on warmness and color and all that stuff. So I put two of the same dummy in two different settings, where it's red and blue, where it's warm, so in the same direction of light, so you guys have a good understanding. Because it's in a warm setting, the colors are more warmer, meaning that the shadows are warmer, and the light is a lot warmer. The light will always be warmer than the shadows, but please understand this. When I say warm shadows, what that really means is it's between the realms of like not a dark type warm red, but like a grayish dark red, because any color that's next to each other can look darker by default. So like for instance, if I take like a very dark green and I put it next to like a very slightly, I guess, darker blue, you can think that that green is probably more warmer than that darker blue. That makes sense. And that blue looks cooler. But if you put that same green next to a very dark yellow, the green's gonna look cooler than the yellow. I think that makes sense, hopefully. So I did that kind of thing with the skin here. I tried my best to do it as best as I could, without it looking too muddy in the sense. I think it looked a bit muddy, but it was just for the overall concept. It's the same skin tone I'm using, but since you see the blue and then the red, it makes all the difference. So you guys can see it's the same type colors, but then again it's also different at the same time. Maybe the lighting could be a little bit different, I can say, but the colors are pretty much the same. But because they're in cool settings and warm settings, it's going to change drastically. So please be aware of that. Now I'm going to get more into the blending side of things now. I think I explained color theory pretty okay. I don't think I hit hard too much with this crash course. I'm going to get more in depth with it when I start posting my Gumroad and stuff on that. But right now I'm going to just teach you guys how to blend. So blending is not that hard in that sense. What blending actually is there's no wrong way of doing it. It's just that the best way is to do this thing where, I don't know, it depends on how your pen works, but whether it's your pen or your keyboard, you can use your keyboard as a hotkey to switch between blending, like the eyedropper tool. If you can switch between that a lot, you'll be able to, you know, start blending more easily. It'll make things more easier on you. Blending is not really based on the brush. It's mainly where you believe where mixing colors not so rough or not so saturated with each other. So if you like switch between the buttons of the eyedropper tool and then going back into the eyedropper tool, but understanding the eyedropper tool is to sample the color and go back and push it in and push it back out, push it in and push it back out, it'll be more easier to understand. If you make this more of a habit on your keyboard or your pen, depending on how it's designed and what tablet you're using it for, it becomes easier to understand this. At first it's going to feel weird and awkward doing it, but after a while using the eyedropper tool, blending doesn't get that trouble or problematic. There are special brushes that kind of does blending on its own. I think that's something that's more of an aesthetic that only I think experienced artists can do, because they're looking for a brush to do a certain specific thing. You can make your own brushes in that sense to work, but I suggest just try to do it the basic way for now to understand it if you're just beginning. Because if you jump into a brush that kind of like does a lot of blending but you don't know how it works, you're gonna get confused and frustrated and wondering why your colors are acting weird. You know, like great stuff. So I suggest be as patient as possible when doing this, and then you can probably get where you need to be. Now to quickly recap, we did color theory, and we understand that cool colors and warm colors are very important to understand. This makes it easier to pick your shadows and lights, because the more darker something may be, you have to look at how the temperature of that color works and the setting of that color and what surrounds it, because what surrounds it can ultimately change how it may look or how it responds in that setting. Like I said with the ball and the blue wall, they both can manipulate the situation depending on how close, or even the floor itself. Like for instance, if like an orange ball, which you will see in a second, orange ball is on like a green setting, the green floor will have some influence on that ball. So whether it's in the shadows or right next to it in the light, a little bit of green will be in that orange ball, depending on how close, or if it's right on top of that grass, or if you want to put it that way, green floor, grass, whatever. So that's something that you guys have to take account. Take account of your shadows, take account of your ambient occlusion, which I mentioned in past videos. Understand your color, temperatures, your cools, your warms, and all that great stuff. So always be close to understand your cast shadows. As you can see closely in this ball here, you can see there's a tint of blue into the shadows. You can see there's a tint of blue I put in the ball itself. I know it's not in a blue setting, but I'm throwing that in there just for you guys to understand. If it was in a blue setting, that will be more of a tinted blue into that thing, so it gives that 3D look other than just the ambient occlusion, which is the darkest part where the light cannot reach. So please take that in consideration. These things are something that you guys should write down and practice. So it's number 1, the base color, number 2, the shadows, number 3, the light, number 4, I think it'll be the ambient light, and then ambient occlusion, and then you put the bounce light, reflective light, and then you put the highlights, or it's probably like the ultimate things. The last thing is put the highlights. That's where you put the brightest color in there. So that's something you should take in consideration as well. So with that said, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you guys coming back and watching my video. I was kind of nervous doing this, but with that said, thank you guys, thank you Patreon, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you guys, later guys.